The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Mark Temple from Sunrise Systems. I will be your presenter today for the webinar on the new financial disclosure system. I have on the line with us Chris Oz from the DTA, who I'll ask to kind of open this up for us, and we'll get started and hopefully have a great session here. Chris?
Good afternoon, everybody. This is our sixth webinar session. So each session has been maturing based on the prior sessions with the questions and the expertise in going through the demo each time. I want to just start by saying we've arranged for those of you who are registered municipal clerks who might want a 1.0 contact hour for records to do that. How we're going to do it is I'm going to announce 3 code words throughout the session. We'll do one in about 10 minutes, and then another about a half hour out, and a third closer to the end. You're going to write those code words down, and then when you're ready to submit the paperwork to the certification unit for your contact hour, you're just going to include those words, all 3 of them, on the form. And the form you're going to use is the individual continuing education agreement form that's on the DLGS website. It's the form that you would use if you were, for example, in Pennsylvania attending a program that wasn't already approved by us for any credits, and you were taking the program and you said, gee, I think I should get credits for this. Let me apply and see what the state says. It's that particular form. It's on the website, and in the GovConnect notice that went out on Tuesday morning, we provided the direct link to it. That said, Mark is going to lead the discussion. Ample time for questions down the road, but I think we've gotten to a point where many of the questions will be answered as Mark makes his presentation. And for the things that we really don't have an answer for you today, and there have only really been a few, I'll reach out to the folks down the hall at the local finance board, and we'll try to get answers to those things and even included in the local finance notice or an FAQ or something in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, Chris. So I'm just going to kind of go over how this webinar will proceed for today. I cannot hear you directly, so if anybody has any questions, what I ask you to do is on the webinar panel that opened up when you first signed in, there is a chat section. You can go down into that chat section and you can ask your question. As Chris had mentioned, we will stop through several points during the webinar and we will answer some of those questions. We will stay on at the end when the webinar is over with, when I'm done, demonstrating all the different screens, and we'll answer as many questions as there are until there are no more questions. So, please keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually now show my screen here. So let's come back here, and everybody should now be seeing the PowerPoint presentation that I see here. So we did have one technical glitch this morning, so I just want to make sure that we're okay right now. So if you can hear me and you can actually see the PowerPoint presentation that says Financial Disclosure Statement, LGE Training Webinar, if a couple people can just, in the chat section say yes, that'll be great. And as the questions come in, as soon as I see some, then we'll know that obviously everybody can see the screen and we can go from there. So, yep, okay, so no more. Everybody can see it, so that's good. If you do have a problem seeing the screen at any point in time, please drop that into the question section. I will monitor that from time to time, so that'll be great. So a couple of things I want to kind of go over here is, real quick, is on this PowerPoint presentation, this is going to be kind of a summary of what we're going to do for today's training. We're going to go over on how to log into the FDS system. We're going to go over how to create and maintain your LGO roster. We will talk about how to set up an LGO account. I'll show you how an LGO files an FDS and how to search for an FDS on the public website. What we will also do is, I kind of utilize some terms here. Let me just go to my second slide. Just open that up. So some of the terms that I use are, just in case nobody's familiar with them, I do use 3-letter acronyms. One happens to stand for LGS, which is your local government services, which is the DCA. LGE is going to refer to yourself, which typically will be municipalities, colleges, counties, JIPs, and so on. Your LGOs will be your local government officials who will be filing what we call your FDS, your financial disclosure statement. So as I go through today, I kind of use those three-letter acronyms to describe certain things, throughout the system. So that being said, let me close this window here, and I'm going to bring up the login page of the system. So before I actually log into the system here, a couple things I want to, kind of address from some of the questions that we've gotten in the past. We're going to be working in the test system, or I'm going to be demonstrating in our test system today. I am going to be utilizing 2 towns that I have set up in the test system. One happens to be Edison Township, the other South Brunswick. I'm using Edison since that's the town that I reside in, so I'm picking on them a little bit. But as we go through today, some of the questions we've gotten have, when will this system be live? When can I actually go in there and start creating my roster? And when can the LGO start filing? We're working out some final preparation on the live system. We're hoping within the next 7 to 10 days that system will be live. And at that point in time, you will receive communication from the DCA once that system is live. And at that point, you'll be able to go in and start creating your rosters. Once your rosters are created, your LGOs can start filing their FDSs. So one of the next questions that come up is, what is the deadline for filing? Well, as of right now, as of today, the deadline has been extended to May 15th, but I will tell you that it's definitely subject to change. It's based on when the system eventually will go live. So, again, you will receive communication from the DCA at some point in time of exactly what the filing deadline will be. But as of today, it stands at May 15th. But again, like I said, most likely that is going to change a little bit, especially when we go live, when we have that go live date and so on and so forth. So that being said, let's get started. We have a lot to cover, and I'll try to go as slow as possible and try to explain everything as possible. But again, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask the question in the panel. And like I said, there will be times that I will stop and answer some of those questions. So that being said, let me come here 1 second, just clear out some of these questions real quick. Okay. The other thing I did want to mention is that today's webinar is being recorded. We are, along with this webinar and the other 5 webinars that we've done so far, we are looking to put them up online. So if you want to go back after today and you want to review this session over again, feel free to do that. We will communicate at some point in time where those webinars are being hosted and where you can actually find them to replay them and so on and so forth. So that being said, where I'm located right now is going to be the login screen for the financial disclosure system, okay? This screen will be the same screen that every user who utilizes the system will come to, whether it's the DCA, the LGS staff, whether it's you as the LGE, or it's the LGO who has to file that FDS. This is where they would actually come into the system to log in and actually to work within the system. Really, the only people who don't come to this would be the public. They're actually going to go to a separate site, which we refer to as the public site, to actually search for those FDSs once they're filed. So a couple things on this screen. The first thing that I want to kind of just go over first is down at the bottom, system requirements. What are the system requirements in order to utilize the system? Well, basically, this is a web-based system, so you need a computer or some device with internet access, a Windows PC, an Apple Mac. I've actually accessed the system through my iPad. So as long as you have a device that can get to the internet, you should be able to access the system that way. Browsers. The system is browser independent, so we support all different browsers. Internet Explorer, Mozilla Firefox, Apple Safari, Google Chrome. All those different browsers are supported within the system. We do ask, there are times within the system, certain areas of the system where you might get a pop-up that comes up. So we ask that, when you're utilizing the system, you either add the URL to your trusted pop-up sites or you turn off pop-up blocker altogether, right, so it doesn't cause a problem. The other thing is that we also display some documents in PDF form throughout the system. So we ask that you have at least either Adobe Acrobat Reader or some other compatible PDF viewing software so you can actually view those PDFs when they do open up. And then from a resolution standpoint, we ask that, for resolution, this is the minimum requirement. Most computers today, especially if you have a larger screen, the resolution's a lot higher, so you should be okay. But we say at a minimum, this is the kind of the resolution that you want to utilize. So a couple things about logging into the system, your login name and your password. The DCA will be forwarding you, before the system goes live, a user ID and a password. Now, the password that you're eventually going to get initially is going to be a temporary password. And we're going to ask that when you first log into the system, you change that password, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a few minutes. But after you do have your account established in the system, there are times that people do forget their password. So since I'm out of the login page here, I just wanted to kind of show you the forgot password link. You will see that in the lower right-hand corner here where my cursor is. So if you forget your password after you've changed it, you can just click on that forgot password link. And what it's going to do is ask you for your login email. Okay, this is going to be your username for the system, right? So if I come in here and I put my email address in, right, and I click on the button that says Get Password, that password will be emailed to that account, as long as that account or that email address that you put in is an active email account on the system. Now, as you can see, I got a red message here that says given email ID is not registered in the system. Well, I typed my email address wrong, right? And I got this message in red. One of the things that you'll see throughout the system is as we do different operations in the system, if you get an error, we usually display a message in red, like we did here. If the operation was successful, we will usually display that message in green. So again, if you see something in red, just take a note and actually kind of correct what the issue is. Well, I see I typed my email address wrong there, so I'm going to correct that. I'm going to click on Get Password, and then what we'll see right here is it will tell me that the password has been emailed to this email address, right? So that was a valid email address in the system. I can go check my email, and I should see the password for this email address in the system. So once you have that information, then you could actually log into the system. And like I said, when you receive your initial user ID, which is going to be your email address and your temporary password, you're going to want to do that or change that when you first get in the system. So let's log into the system now. So I'm going to put in my email address, and I'm going to put in my password. I'm going to hit and log in. And what that's going to do is that's going to take me to the home screen of the FDS system. So a couple things that I want to kind of show you on the screen as we go through it. In the upper right-hand corner, okay, up here you'll see a little red dot that I'm using to point out things. Cheryl happens to be the clerk here in Edison Township, right? Your name will be displayed there, okay? Now, the usernames and the email addresses that we're going to be communicating with you for the username and password, the DCA is getting that from GovConnect. So whatever information is there, that's where the username and temporary password is going to be sent to, okay? So here it's saying Cheryl Rusamato, she's the clerk here in Edison Township. We can see the entity name will be listed right below it, Edison Township. And then what you'll see just below that is you will see a logout button, right? And at this point in time, since this is a web-based system, there are a couple of ways you can log out of the system. One way is you can click on this logout button. That will log you out. The second way is you can, since this is a browser, you can close your browser. I'm using Internet Explorer, so if I click on the red X in the upper right-hand corner, that will close my browser and log me out of the system. And the third way that you can be logged out of the system is that if you're logged in and haven't used the system for a period of time, for security, the system's automatically going to log you out. And then at that point in time, you would just have to log back in. So those are the different ways you can log in and log out of the system. The other thing I wanted to point out, too, is we have a status bar here, right? So our submission year says 2014, right? It's the current year. These are the submissions that are being done. When we move into next year to 2015, the DCA at that point in time will update and roll over the year to the 2015. And once you see the submission year set to 2015 or a subsequent year, then your LGOs can actually start filing their FDSs for that particular year. But until that point, until that switches to 2015, they cannot file until that is done. You'll also see how many people you have on your roster. So I have 7 individuals on my roster, and how many FDS submissions have been done off my roster, and I've done 7 submissions, right? So these are some quick stats that you can actually see. So I'm going to pause there for 1 second before I go down to the icons here, and I'm going to let Chris give out the first code word. Okay,
Okay, everybody, the first code word, and you should write this down, is platinum. P-L-A-T-I-N as in Nancy, U-M as in Mike. Platinum. P-L-A-T-I-N as in Nancy, U-M as in Mike. Platinum.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Okay, so since I'm at a stopping point right at the moment here, I'm going to just go through a couple of quick questions, or one question that came up. One was, what is the time frame of no use before you are logged out of the system? We haven't determined that yet. It could be, you know, as little as maybe 15 minutes. It could be as much as an hour. We will work with the DCA on setting that timer. So we don't actually have an established time just yet, but you know, it will be, like I said, it could be as little as, let's say, 15 minutes. You know, we have control, but we're going to be in, you know, we'll talk with the DCA to see, you know, what they're comfortable with, you know, leaving this logged in and so on and so forth before it logs out. Like I said, if it does log you out, all you need to do is just log back into the system at that point in time. There's a couple other ones. I have one person here, Rob, saying that he can't see the screens changing. I don't know if anybody else has any problems seeing the screens change. I am monitoring that. So it looks like I'm on the current screen right now. So if you're still having a problem, please send me an email back. Or if you're having a problem with sound, what I would do is I would just hang up or log back into the system. I know a couple people this morning had some problems. Once they logged out and logged back in, they were fine and were able to see everything fine. So if, you know, the two people having a problem with sound in the screen, if you can log back out and log back in, you know, just, you know, please see if that takes care of the problem. Okay. It says, one question here real quick, it says, will you lose any data if the system times out? You could lose possibly just the LGO information that you're currently working on at that point in time. There's very little information that you have to put into the system. So if anything, it's literally a few keystrokes if you do lose anything, if it automatically logs you out. But as we go through the process, you'll see what I'll tell you to do to complete the process. So you really shouldn't be left in the middle of anything as you're going through that. Okay. So let me continue on. I'll get back to some of the questions a little bit later here. Okay, so that being said, let's go here and let me get show. Okay, so now below here, what you do is you have a couple of icons here. One says Manage LGO Roster. You have the reports, and you have the Edit Local Government Edit Entity Profile. So what we ask you to do is the first time you log into the system, go into Edit Profile, and this is where you can actually review the information that we've entered into the system. If anything needs to change, you can change it here. But more importantly, what we ask you to do is go down to the lower left-hand corner where you see the two password fields, and we ask there is that you change a temporary password that you're going to be receiving, right? So clear out the two fields, the password and the confirm password field, and then what you'll need to do is you'll need to enter your password in conforming to the following guidelines. Your password will need to be between 8 and 16 characters in length, and it will need to contain at least one letter and one number in that password, okay? As long as you do that and hit save, then that new password should be saved successfully. So if I click Save now, well, you'll see what happens is I didn't actually type in a password that conformed to those requirements, right? It tells me that my password must be between 8 and 16 characters containing one letter and one number. I only typed in a password that was 4, right? So I'll come back here, I'll correct it. Right? Once I do that and I click on Save, then what I should get is a message up at the top and the bottom of the screen in green that says the operation was successful, okay? So in this case, my password was updated successfully because I got that message in green. Again, if something is not correct in the system, if I mess up the phone number, let's say, and I try to hit save, again, you will get a message in red letting you know that whatever is not valid, and I'll usually tell you in this case it's the phone number. In that case, I just have to come down, correct the phone number, put the 0 back in, hit save, and now you'll see that that operation saved successfully. So again, that's how you would come in and actually change your password within the system. So let me go back out to the home screen. I'm going to click on the home button. Okay, take us back out. The reports menu, we are working on some reports. We do have one in there right now, which is basically your roster that you can print out in paper form if you want to. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. And then here will be really where you're going to be doing most of your work within the system. It's the Manage LGO roster. So before I actually go into that, let me kind of talk about some differences with this new system this year compared to last year. With the system this year, in order for your LGOs to be able to file, they're going to have to be on the roster first, okay? I think in the past what would happen is your rosters were basically formulated and created after the fact. But today, with the new system, those rosters are going to have to be created first before your LGOs can file, right? So you're going to have to go through here. Once the system goes live, that's one of the first things we're going to ask you to do is get in there and actually start creating those rosters. So the way to do that, or actually to manage your roster, I'm going to click on Manage LGO Roster. And since I've been using this account for demo purposes over the last several days, you'll notice that I already have people that are on my roster, right? Now, there's a couple different ways you can actually bring up people on your roster, okay? I can do a name search up at the top, okay? So I can type in a name, right? Let's say I type in Williams, right? I want to search for Williams as the last name. I hit search. All Williams come up in my search grid down below, right? So I can search by full last name. I can also search by just the first letter of the last name, right? So if I just do W and hit search, well, then I get all people whose last name starts with W, right? So I get James Walker, I get Elizabeth White, I get Michael Williams. They all come up because their last name started with W. And I could do the same thing with the first name as well. If I wanted to pull up everybody that had an M in their first name, right, and hit search, well, then I get two people that come up, myself, Mark Zemple, and I also have Michael Williams that come up. So both of these actually, come up for me right there, right? So that's how you can actually pull up and see or do a name search. I do know that some towns who have maybe a roster of 30, 40 people, it's not that difficult to just scroll through the roster once it's displayed on the screen. But if you're a larger municipality like one of the largest cities, who literally have hundreds of people on the roster, it would be a lot easier just to type the name and actually, search them and pull them up off your roster. Once your search results come up where your roster comes up down at the bottom, okay, this is what we call the search grid, okay, and you'll see there's columns there, last name, first name, board/agency, title, PIN number, FDS file, so on and so forth. But one of the things that we do in the system here is any of our column headings up at the top, if you click on that column heading, the first click will put this column in ascending order. A second click will put it in descending order. So if you take a look at my first name column, right, we have Sam come up, Stephen, Robert, Mark, right? It's not in alphabetical order. So if I click on first name, it puts it in alphabetical order in ascending order, right? That's the first click. If I do a second click on first name, it'll put it in descending order, right? And that'll apply to any column, right? So if I do the last name, that puts it in ascending order, Adams, Jones, Smith, Zemple, Walker, White, Williams, and so on and so forth. Same thing with board and agency, right? If I want to group all the boards and agencies together, or all the different titles, just by clicking on that column heading, it's actually going to sort both in ascending and descending order every time that I do that. But let's say that I start at my roster, right, but I'm not complete, right? I need to add more individuals to my roster. Well, once I'm on this screen, there's a button right at the bottom that says Add LGO. That's what I'm going to do there. I'm going to click on that button. And here what we're going to do is to start the process up at the first section at the top, we're going to enter in that LGO's first name and their last name, right? So today I'm going to use, this is the person I'm going to use. His name is Gary Woodland. Right? So that's the person that I'm using today. If you have a middle name or a middle initial that you want to put in, you can actually put it in. It isn't a required field. Any of the fields that have a red asterisk are the required fields that you have to enter something in. So if you want to put a middle name or middle initial, that's fine. Now, one of the things that you'll see here is you'll actually see there's a PIN number here, but right now it says NA, right? That's because the system hasn't generated that PIN number yet. And the way you would do that is once I get the first and the last name in there, I'm going to click on the Save button right here, and the system is going to generate a unique PIN number for this person or this LGO. So in this case, Gary Woodland is going to have this PIN number. Now let's talk about the PIN number for a little bit. This PIN number is unique to Gary just in this organization right here, this roster, Edison Township. If Gary happens to be on somebody else's roster, whether a county, another municipality, JIF, what have you, that roster will generate another unique PIN number for Gary. And at some point in time, Gary's going to take all those PIN numbers and he's going to create an account on the system and he's going to combine all those PIN numbers together so all his positions fall under his account. The PIN number for Edison Township, if Gary has multiple positions within Edison Township that he has to file an FDS, that PIN number will stay the same within Edison Township. It will not change. So again, the PIN number is going to be an important field. What you're going to have to do as a clerk, and I'm going to say clerk because that's the majority of the participants we have on today's call. Once you create this LGO on the roster, you will need to communicate to that person the first name you use, the last name you use, and their PIN number because they're going to need that in order to register within the system. One other thing I want to talk about with first name, really with the name Gary, it doesn't apply. But what I've been talking about in some of the earlier sessions with people is I would use their full legal name for first name when you're creating the rosters. And what I mean by that, you might have somebody that goes by Mike or Rob or Jim. Instead of using their nickname or short name, you might want to use the full name, like Michael, Robert, James, what have you. When they register, the LGO registers, if they want to change their name at that time, that's fine. But I would just think for, being standard, you might want to use their full name there. If I had, let's say, or you put on your roster Michael Woodland, for example, and they try to register as Mike Woodland, it's not going to allow them to do it, right? We'll see that a little bit later when I actually create an LGO account. So once we get their first name and their last name and we click on save and we get that PIN number, now we're going to go down to the next section and we're going to add the different positions they hold within this organization. So for Edison Township, I'm going to say that Gary here is an elected official, right? I'm going to say he's on the governing body and he is a council person, right? So I'll put that in there. Now we also have the ability, or you will have the ability to list their term dates for that position here. Now it's not a required field. If you do enter the information in, it will appear on their FDS when they go to file for that position. Again, like I said, if you have it, you can put it in, great. If you don't, we're not requiring it. So I'm not going to put any term dates in right now, but what I'm going to do is now that I've entered these three fields in, I'm going to click on the Save button, and as soon as I do that, down below in the last section where it says listed positions held, right now it says nothing held. As soon as I hit on Save, what will happen is now you'll notice that Gary Woodland's position as councilperson has now been listed below. So now I have one position for him associated with Edison Township. Let's say Gary also is part of, let's say he's on the planning board, right? And let's say he's a member, just a regular member. I'll add that there. I'll click on Save. And now down below in the list of positions, we'll see Gary listed as a planning board member. Now, I can continue to add as many positions as Gary has within Edison Township. When I'm done adding all the positions in, we have given you a feature to print out this screen by clicking on the print button at the bottom. So if you want to print out this sheet and hand it to Gary so he has his information, that's fine. Or some people there, can I email his PIN number to him? That's fine too. It's however you want to communicate that information to him. It's up to you how you want to do it. You could do it anyway, in person, mail, pigeon, whatever. But you need to get their first name, their last name, and their PIN number to them because they're going to need that information to register. Now, let's say I enter a position here that really he didn't have to, he didn't have to file an FDS for. Well, I can click on the delete button and I can delete that position just by clicking on the delete button over here. If I want to go on to my next person and add my next person in the system, now I can click on Add New LGO. It'll clear out this screen, and now I can come in here and I can type my next person in, right? So let's give it a second here to refresh, right? So it clears it out. Now I put my next person in and fill out the information the same way. So the question that came up earlier is if you didn't save anything, would I lose anything? Really, the information that you would lose would be very minimal because once I put my first name, last name, and hit save and get my PIN number, yeah, you might be in the process of putting in a position and didn't hit save and maybe went to lunch. And if the system timed out, you're not going to lose Gary's account altogether. All you would lose is the last position you were trying to put in. that's fine. You could just, go back into your roster and you can just update that additional position, okay? So again, you're really not going to lose a lot of information. If I click on the back button in the lower left-hand corner, it'll take me back out to my roster. And now what I'll see down at the bottom is we'll see Gary Woodland listed there. And we'll see he's listed twice for both positions. One is the council person, one is the planning board member, right? We'll notice that his PIN number is the same, right? Because remember what I said is his PIN number stays the same throughout the organization. And we'll also notice that in the FDS file field, it says no, because he hasn't filed an FDS yet. As soon as he files an FDS, this will be updated, okay? Couple other things real quick. If you want to go back into Gary and edit his account, I can click on the edit button over here, right? When I do that, I can add additional positions. I can delete a position. I can also delete Gary altogether, okay, as long as he has not filed an FDS. Once an FDS is filed, you cannot delete a person. Let me go back and just pull up somebody who's already had an FDS filed. Let's take Stephen Jones here. If I go into edit for Stephen, you'll notice here that the delete button is gone. I cannot delete him off my list. But what I can do is for next year when we copy over these rosters, I can actually disable them if he's no longer on your active roster for the following year. So that's where this disable button comes, which ultimately controls this column, this active, inactive, basically boxes. Anything that's unchecked is inactive. Anything checked is an active person on the roster. So again, that's managing the rosters. Now, a couple of things about the rosters. We do know that this year it's probably going to be the most work for you to create these rosters because you're going to have to create them from scratch. The question had come up about, well, what about the rosters we've created in the past? Couldn't you pull that data over and put it in there? Frankly, we took a look at the data, and the quality of the data wasn't at a point where we thought that it would make sense bringing it over. We felt that if we brought that data over, it would have probably caused more work for you to massage that data instead of just creating this data from scratch. But the good thing is that when we go into subsequent years, into 2015 and beyond, these rosters will be copied over to the new year. So next year, really all you'll have to do from a maintenance standpoint is just go in and add anybody new to the roster who has new positions or inactivate the ones who no longer apply. But for the most part, we feel that most of the rosters will stay intact for the majority from year to year. It's just going to be some maintenance, for the new people, coming on and some of the old people going off that you'll have to, manage within the system. So again, that's how we add different individuals to the roster. So that being said, I'm going to come out to the home menu, and I just want to, we're going to take questions in about 30 seconds here, but I just want to show you that on my roster update, it said 7 before. I now have 8 individuals on my roster because we've added Gary to my roster. But our submissions are still at 7 because Gary has not submitted yet, right? So we're still at 7 on the submission side, right? So let me pause there. I'm going to pull up my question queue, take a look at the questions that we have. We have a bunch here, and kind of go through them real quick here.
And let me give you guys the second code word while Mark's setting up the questions. So grab your pen. The second password or code word is Seagull. S-E-A-G-U-L-L, Seagull, S-E-A-G-U-L-L, Seagull.
Okay, so let me go through the questions here. We have a bunch of questions. So it says the first question says, will only the municipal clerk have a login, or will it be anyone she designates? Initially, the login or the username that we're going to send out is going to go to the municipal clerk. So the login and the temporary password will be sent to the municipal clerk. Once the municipal clerk receives that login and password, she can let somebody else utilize that username and password to go in and actually manage the roster or create the roster and so on and so forth. Now, we have had the question where some municipal clerks said, well, I don't want to give my email address out to somebody because I use it for other things, in my day-to-day work. That's fine. What I would recommend is just create the password to something that's not your normal password as the municipal clerk. Just create a temporary password for now to give to that person who's going to be managing the roster. Let them manage the roster for now, and you can always come back in later on and change that password if you want. I mean, you can change the password as many times as you want. So again, but right now for this year, there's only going to be one user name and password given per entity. We will look at going into next year, possibly increasing that to allow multiple usernames to be able to manage the rosters. But for the first year of this first version of the system, it's only going to be one username and password. Unfortunately, you'll have to share if somebody else other than yourself as the municipal clerk manages the roster for you. Okay? Okay, let me go back up here. Next question. Will I, the deputy clerk, be able to get the email to be able to do it for our municipality? Again, it's going to be sent to the municipal clerk first. If the municipal clerk wants to share that information with you, then you'll have to speak to the municipal clerk on that if you're managing the process. It says, is our roster in there from last year? Again, I answered that before. No, we did not pull over the rosters from last year because of the quality of the data. They will have to be created from scratch. Can you use the tab button to move through the entry field, or do you have to use the mouse to move the cursor? You know what? Good question. I haven't tried it, but I believe you can use the mouse. I mean the tab button. Yeah, yeah. So if I click on the tab button, it will allow me to go from field to field. Yes, it does. So next question. I have a commissioner that is also on the HIF and the JIF. Do we add those positions, or does each entity enter his name in? I definitely know for the JIF will enter him as a separate person on their roster and assign him their unique PIN number. I'm not sure. Chris, what's HIF? Do you know?
Say that again,
HIF. It says JIF. I know JIF, J-I-F, but what's HIF?
Health Insurance Fund.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, so if that person is both on the Health Insurance Fund and the JIF, and they're two separate entities, they're going to get two separate PINs from each entity. Okay? So each entity is responsible for managing their rosters. You are not responsible for their PIN numbers for other entities other than your own. Okay? What is the disabled box at the bottom? I think I talked about that. It's really making the person inactive. Like, so when we go into next year, anybody that's no longer part of your organization or does not have to file, you would click on that disabled box, and it basically marks them as being inactive. Next question. Will the program let me know if a position is exempt from filing in FDS? No. You will have to go based on the guidelines that the state and publications have put out on who has to file. Okay, I know there's multiple publications out there. There's up at the municipal clerk's website, there's a desk reference that references this section. I know out on the DCA site there's information, and as Chris will say, there's been notices sent out in the past, you know, last year especially, that will let you know who and who does not have to file. One of the things that Chris will say will be, you know, contact your counsel or whoever is responsible for your labor relations and discuss with them who and who does not have to file an FDS. Okay, but no, the system will not tell you who and who does not have to file. Next question: can multiple people be logged in under the one username? If only one we have takes so long to set up. Yes. You can use that username. Multiple people can be set up, multiple people can be logged in with that same username and can be creating the roster at the same time. Yes, there should not be a conflict there. It says, please include county clerks in the dialogue as we are responsible for the counties. Yes, I'm sorry, Mary. Yes, you're right. I use clerks because they're the majority of the people on there, but you're absolutely right. Yes, the county clerks are responsible as well too. So sorry about that. Oh yeah, okay. Health Insurance Fund, yeah, the HIF is Health Insurance Fund. Okay, good. So we've got through all our questions at this juncture. We will answer more questions as we go further through. So again, from a roster standpoint and setting up the roster, that's really all you need to do to set up the roster. You know, once you get that the LGO on the roster, you know, and you relay that information, the name that you utilized and the PIN number to that LGO, you're pretty much done at that point in time. You know, like I said, now for other maintenance of the roster, you know, if you have a new individual that joins your organization, you know, halfway through the year, you'll have to add them to the roster at that time, and then that individual will have 30 days to actually file their FDS. If you have somebody that's already on your roster that has been appointed to a new position that's required to file an FDS, well, all you would need to do is come in here. Let's say we take Sam Adams here, right? and Sam has been, appointed to another position within Edison Township, well, all I'll do is come here. I'll just put in the new position information, right? So let me just say here other, and I'm just going to say, let's say, I don't know if they have to file, but I'll just put in Shade Tree, for example, right? And I'll put member as well too, and I'll hit save. Now that position has been added, to the list here. And if I go back out to my roster, right, if we sort by Sam Adams, right, we'll see now that he's been added to the roster, right? We had him here twice before, but guess what? If we look over at the FBS filed field, it says no. Because he already filed his FBS for the first two positions, now I've added a new position to him. He's going to have to refile his FBS with this new position, okay? And we'll talk about that when we get over to filing an FBS. But you can see that's how I would add somebody if they were appointed, midway through the year and already are on your roster. You can actually come in and just add that additional position there at any point in time. And then Sam Adams would actually have 30 days from today, or I guess the appointment date to actually, go in and file his FBS. So again, that's how you would go ahead and do that. So at this point in time, I'm going to log off here because I want to log in one more time as another entity because I want to add Gary Woodland to one more town here just to show you when he has multiple pins, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in and South Brunswick Township. And I'm going to go into, same way, I'm going to go into manage my LGO roster for South Brunswick. And Gary Woodland isn't already on my roster, so I'm going to click on Add LGO. And I'm going to put in Gary Woodland. I'm going to click on Save. And now what we're going to get is we're going to get a new PIN number here, 53377. And I'm going to have to go back to Edison because I forgot to write down the PIN number before because I'm going to need that. But we have a different PIN number that was assigned to Gary for South Brunswick Township. And then here what we're going to do, I'm going to say that he's the police chief. I'm going to click on Save. And now Gary Woodland has been added as the police chief in South Brunswick Township. So now he has a different PIN number for South Brunswick Township. So he's going to take those couple of PIN numbers and utilize them to file his FBS. So let me do this. Let me just grab my PIN number from Edison since I didn't write it down. And Gary Woodland, his PIN number is 62454. 62454. Okay, good. Okay, so now I got my PIN numbers. So now what I'm going to show you is because, again, as municipal clerks, county clerks, what have you, you're going to have to file an FBS as an LGO. I know you're probably going to get questions from your LGOs on, how to set up, their accounts and so on and so forth. So let me talk a couple of things about the live system real quick. Once the system goes live, we will be having information up there, instructional information. One of the things that I'll be working on is a short training video for the LGOs that they can watch. It's going to be probably a 3 to 5 minute video that will actually kind of instruct them and show them what they need to do to file their FBS. So, we're going to try to take that burden off of you. We also know that you're probably going to get some older members come to you for help. There's going to be members, people that don't have a computer, they don't have an email address. So a couple of things we say with that. For people who don't have an email address, there are a couple of ways to get an email address for a person. The township could assign an email address if it's available, if they can do that. There are free services out there like Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook they can obtain a free email address. In order for them to file, if they need help filing, okay, we recommend that they seek out a family member's help first, okay, to help file their FBS, okay. We don't want you filing, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to let because I know Chris likes to talk about this, and he does it very well, about, there have been municipal clerks that have been asked to file people's LGOs, FBSs in the past. We strongly discourage that, and I'll let Chris just touch on that real quick before we actually go into file, just the reasons why you shouldn't file.
The biggest, the answer that I can give, and it's more of a recommendation, not really something that's official from us. We don't have anything that says you can't fill out an FDS for somebody else. But look at it this way. The information that's on these forms and that eventually gets filed, that becomes the public record, is information that the public sees. You have a lot of gadflies that will see this. You have newspaper reporters that will see this. So imagine a scenario where a mayor or council person has asked you as the clerk to complete his or her FDS, and you do that. Then down the road, somebody determines that the mayor conveniently left off the Long Beach Island summer house from the real estate section, and they file an ethics complaint. You know, what do you think the mayor is going to say at that point? I think, you know, the mayor, it could turn out that the mayor starts pointing at you as the clerk who filled the form out and says, well, I'm not liable, I'm not responsible because the municipal clerk filled this out for me. You really got to, you know, be cautious of that. There's over, you know, there's like 40,000 LGOs that fill these things out. You also have a time and attention issue. I mean, if you have if you're in a smaller town, you only have 7 or 8 of these, maybe you can help these people a little bit easier than if you have 400 or 500 LGOs. But you know, you have to make that decision. We caution against it. It's not easy. I understand. I've been in your shoes before. It's not easy when one of the elected people come into your office and says, can you do this for me? If you're in the corner on the issue, maybe the best approach would be to have them do it themselves, but have them do it in the office so that you can at least walk them through it. But at that point, it's still factual that they're completing the FDS and that you're not actually doing it for them. And remember this too: if you do end up doing this for somebody else, you're doing it using their username and PIN. You're not able to do this through the administrative side of this. So you're in a position now of having to go in and setting up their account, creating the password for them and the username, and that's the only way that you could actually do that for them. So that's pretty much all we can really say on the point. You have to make up your own minds on that.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so let's talk about how to file as an LGO now, okay? On the login screen, we have a section down here right under the login button that says New Registration Local Government Officer. So we would click on that link right there, okay? And what this is going to do is this is now going to take us to the registration screen. Now, what it's going to ask us, the first thing it's going to ask us to do is put in our first name, our last name, and the PIN number that we've been given. Now, remember, I have 2 PIN numbers I've been given. I've been given one from Edison Township, and I've been given one from South Brunswick Township. So a question that has come up is, well, which PIN has to be registered first? It doesn't matter which one is registered first. When I establish my account, I can use either PIN. Once my account is established, I can add any additional PINs that I receive to my account and basically take all my positions and just add them all to my account. So let's do that. I'm going to put in my first name here, which is Gary, and my last name. And now I'm going to put one of the PIN numbers. I'm going to use the Edison PIN number first, right? So I'll put that in. And once I put that in, okay, and I hit validate, what will happen is I should get a message. Oh, I got a message in red that says first name, last name, or PIN number didn't match, okay? This is because we use all 3 fields as validation. If you notice, I forgot, or I dropped the Y off of Gary. I just put GAR, right? Well, that's not how it was originally registered within the system with that PIN number. It was Gary. So if I just correct that and I just put Gary and I click on Validate PIN, now I should get a message in green that the given PIN has been validated successfully. Please continue with the registration. And then now at this point, I can go and continue to register and put my information in. All right, so I'll go here, fill this in real quick. And then when I come down to the next section, which is my credential information, we're asking that the LGO put in an email address. That's going to be their username for the system, right? So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to put Mark, what might this mean today? It's going to ask me to validate that. And then I have to put my password in, right? So Right? So I'm going to fill all that information in. I'm going to fill in my address information. I'm going to create my credentials, which is my login name and my password. And then we scroll down the screen, and we'll have some definitions and instructions about filing an FDS that we hope that the LGO reads. And once they read all that, at the bottom they click on the I read the definitions and I agree, or I read the definitions and I agree. And now they can click on the button here and actually register their account. All right, so I'll do that. And basically, if their account registration is successful, it will tell them you've registered successfully. It will list their name, their login, and their password. Now I can take this, they can print it out and keep it for safekeeping. And now once they've had that, once they've registered on the system, now they can actually go in and actually start the process to file their FDS. So what I'll do at this point in time is go back to the login screen, right? I'm going to log in with that new account that I just set up. Right, so I'll put in my username and my password. I'll click on Login. We come to the home screen for the LGO, and this screen will look similar to the screen that you saw, but a little bit different icons here, right? We have one icon. The first one is File Financial Disclosure Statement. We have a Manage Positions icon, and an Edit Profile, which is similar to what you had before. If I click on that, I can come in here, right, and I can update any information that I need to at this point in time within this screen, right? If I want to change my password, want to update my address information, my name or whatever, I can actually come in here and do that at that time. We'll notice that up at the top, the submission year is still 2014. My submission is pending. It hasn't been filed yet. Now, what I could do at this point, remember I had a second PIN number from South Brunswick Township. I can now go and associate that PIN number with my account. And let me talk about that for a second when we go to file. If I don't associate that South Brunswick PIN number with my account right now, and I go in and I fill out my FDS form and I submit it, okay, when I get that second PIN number from South Brunswick and I attach it to my account, because my first FDS was already filed with the positions with the first PIN number, I then have to refile a second FDS, right, because that PIN number I put in after the fact. But if the LGO waits and gets all their PIN numbers first and registers all their PIN numbers in the system, they will only have to file one FDS for all their PINs, for all their positions, no matter what entity they belong to. So we recommend that if you're talking to your LGOs, tell them to wait till they get all their PINs from all their different organizations and register them all in their account. Because once they're all registered, then they only have to file that FDS one time, okay? So let's do this. I'm going to go into Manage Positions. I'm going to take the happy path here. I'm going to put in my first name and last name, how it was registered in South Brunswick, and I'm going to put in my South Brunswick PIN number, right? So which is 53377. I'm going to click on Validate PIN, and then as soon as I do that, it says PIN validated successfully. If I look at my position history down below, now you'll see all three positions listed, the two for Edison Township and the one for South Brunswick. So all three positions have now been attached to my account. If I have another entity that I am associated with and they give me a PIN number, I can come in here, put that PIN number in and validate it, and that position will be added to my account. So again, each time they come in here and update their PIN number or manage their position, that new position will be added to this account. Now, since I have all my positions added, I don't have any more positions out there, I'm then going to go over to the button or the link that says File Financial Disclosure Statement, and I'm going to click on that link. So let me talk about these screens that we're going to see here for filing your financial disclosure statement. There are 8 screens that they're going to go through, okay, and it's basically replicating the paper form. Each section of the form is a separate screen here on the system, right? So the first section is going to be basically their personal information, which we have listed here, right? So again, some of this information is pulling over from their profile. You know, I can come in here and I can enter, you know, my phone number if I want. I'm going to list my my wife or my spouse since there's going to be information that I need to list for her. You'll notice that down below that here's the list of positions that will be included as part of this FDS filing. So all 3 of my positions will be included as part of this filing. And now what we'll be able to do is at the bottom of the screen here, I can either click on Save and save everything that I've done up to this point, or I can click on next and go to the next page. And by clicking on next, it also does save at the same time, right? But let's say I just wanted to click on save, right? I want to stay on this page. Well, it'll tell me personal information stored successfully, right, in green, right? So we've saved that information. Now, one of the benefits of this year's system, or the new system, is that if somebody gets to a point when they're filling out their FDS and they don't have the information readily available for them, and they get out of the system and come back in at another time, they don't have to re-enter everything in for the form. Whatever's been entered in and saved will be there, okay? They can just pick up where they left off, right? And I'll show you that as we go through the form. So let's click on next. I'm going to go to the next page. Here I need to list my sources of income, right? So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to say, okay, South Brunswick Township. Put the address in. Right, and we default to self, right? That's going to be our default here. So now at this point in time, I've added this source of income. I'm going to click on Save. What that'll do is that'll add that to the bottom here as a list of entries, right? I'm going to put in Edison Township. Right. So I'm going to list that as well too. So I'll hit save there because I get some money, you know, for let's say whatever, right? And then I'm going to list also. I can list my spouse. Right, and I'm going to say spouse, and I'm going to put that and save that. So you can see I can continue on screen 2 here. For my sources of income, I can list as many sources of income that me, my spouse, my dependents have that I need to list, that I need to legally list here, right? I can do all that. When I'm done adding that information, I can now click on next and go to the next screen. It's going to ask me to list any sources of fees and honorariums. Well, I don't have any, right? So I'm going to click on next and go to the next screen. Up, and look what happens. I get a pop-up box. It tells me that I need to proceed, I need to at least have one entry listed, or I need to select the none button or none box, and that's right up here, okay? So if I don't have any fees or honorariums or sources of income there, I can just click on none, and then I can click on next, and that'll take me to the next screen. So now I'm on screen or step 4 of 8, right? Here it's going to ask me to list any sources of gifts or reimbursements. Nah, I don't have any, right? So again, I'll click on none, and I'll hit next. And now it's going to ask me to list any interest that I might have, right? So here I'm going to say, right, so I'll list that, you know, I have some interest in the Metuchen Bagel Shop. I'll click on Save, right? So it'll list that down below here, right? Now, at any point in time, as I'm going through this, there is a button up at the top that says Preview FDS Form. I can always click on that, and I can always look at the paper copy, the normal paper copy that you've always seen, okay? And I can see the information that I've already entered in, how that appears on the form, right? So I can see here, you know, here are my positions, you know, here's the sources of income, you know, here's the interest that I held, and so on and so forth. So as we go through, you can actually see or take a look at the form of how it's being filled out. Now, this is one of those pop-up boxes that come up I explained earlier under System Requirements and PDF. So again, that's why we ask you to, you know, enable pop-up blockers and be able to have PDF software as well there too. Okay. Okay, so let's continue here. I'm going to go to the next screen. Now it's asking me to list my real property here in the state of New Jersey. Okay. Now it's asking me for my block and lot. Well, let's say right now at this point in time, I don't know what my block and lot is offhand. I'm going to have to come in here later on. Well, that's fine. I mean, if I happen to, let's say, just log out of the system, right? And now later on today, I want to come in and I want to, you know, complete that. I got the block and lot information. I can log back in. Okay. I can go to File FDS Form, right? It'll take me to the first screen, but everything that I've entered in is still there, right? So my spouse's name is there. I come to the next screen. All my sources of income are still there, right? No fees or honorariums, no reimbursement expenses. My Metuchen Bagel Shop is there, right? Now I'm back to my real property screen, right? So all that information has been retained in the system, right? The user doesn't have to go back in and re-enter all that information. So now I'll list my sources of income. So let's say I live in Edison Township, so I'll come down, I'll put in my block and lot, okay? Now, one of the problems with last year's system I heard was that individuals couldn't split out percentages. So if I say me and my wife, jointly own our home, I own 50%, she does. Well, I can put in 50% ownership listed as self here, and then what I can do is I can come back here. I could say, Edison Township, right? And I could say 50% is my spouse, right? So I can list those different percentages down below here, okay? So again, one of the problems I heard last year was that users couldn't list those different percentages. I'll click on next. Again, there's a comment section. I'll just put in a comment. I'll say this is a test FDS form, right? I'll click on next. And now it's going to take me to the last screen, which ends up being our submission screen. This is where we can actually submit our form. Now, one of the things we'll see is down here, this is our submit button down below here, okay? That submit button, okay, as you can see right now is grayed out, okay? And that will not be enabled unless two things happen on this screen. The one thing is if somebody hasn't previewed their FDS form at any point during this process, we're going to force them to look at their form at the end no matter what, okay? So we give them a button here letting them know that it's mandatory that they look at their form before they file, right? So we're forcing them to click on that button and open up their FDS form so they can preview it, okay? And then the second thing we're going to force them to do is to electronically sign this, right? So here I need to type my name, right? Gary Woodland, that's who I am, right? So I put my name in there, and once I view that and I type in my name, now my submit button is enabled. Now I can go ahead and submit this FDS form. So here I'll go and I'll click on Submit Financial Disclosure, right? It's going to tell you that you're going to submit your form today, but once this form is submitted, you cannot amend it, supplement it, modify, change it in any way, okay? So once this is submitted, there's no longer any changes allowed to this form, okay? So the person who's submitting this has to make sure this is correct. They have to make sure they got that house on Long Beach Island onto this form, because once it's submitted, they're not going to be able to edit this form, okay? So I'm fine. I double, triple checked it. I'm fine with it. I'm going to click on OK. Okay, and what it's going to do is right now it's going to give me a confirmation ID. It's going to tell me my form has been submitted successfully. It's going to give me a date and time that it's been submitted. So here's a couple of things I want to point out at this juncture. Number one, in the past, or last year's system, the LGOs were required to bring you a receipt and I believe a copy of the FDS that they filed. That no longer applies. They do not have to do that, okay? Next question that comes up is, can an LGO file after the deadline? Absolutely, okay? But the system is going to date and timestamp exactly when they filed that FDS, okay? So that's going to be there. As the LGO, I can come here and I can print out this information, this confirmation, if I want it, okay? Oops, what I do there? Oh, yeah, I can print out that confirmation if I want it. And if I view my FDS form, okay, you'll notice now on the second page where before the date and the name was blank, it's now filled in because I've electronically signed this and actually filed this form, okay? So again, once it's filed, if I go out to the home screen, okay, we'll notice here that the FDS has been submitted, okay, and the financial disclosure statement link is no longer valid, right? I can't do anything now with that link, right, because we've already filed for all the positions that I have. Now, if I got a new position, okay, and I've been appointed to a new board, then this becomes enabled, and now I can go and file for that new position. So, for example, I think it was, I think this was the one position that I added on a roster earlier, that we added a different position. Let me just remember what the password was I used for that. Let's try that. Now, okay, I forgot what it was. But yeah, that's where, again, if a new position is added, then that file icon comes available again. and they could file actually for that new position that they've been appointed to. But here's a couple of things that happen once they file. If I go back in or I log back in as the LGE back into Edison Township, and I go to look at my roster, if we look at Gary Woodland, we'll now see FDS filed is set to yes. Okay, so as soon as they file their financial disclosure statement, this column gets updated, right? So you can always come in here and just, as a courtesy, you can take a look and see who's filed and who hasn't filed within your organization, right? So that occurs immediately. Same thing if I logged into South Brunswick. If I go into South Brunswick, Gary Woodland will say yes, because that position was also part of that FDS I filed. But the last thing that happens is now I moved over to the public search site that will be available for the public to search. As soon as that LGO files, that FDS will be available out on the public site, right? So I can come out here and I can actually do a search for, let's say, the last name Woodland and hit search. And then you'll see Gary Woodland comes up 3 times, right? There's 3 positions that have been filed for Gary, right? I can just click on the view button all the way to the right of the line, and I can actually pull up that FDS form, and I can review that FDS form. So that's one way you can actually view an individual's form, is by clicking on that link there. The other way you could pull up FDS forms is you can pull them up by entity, right? So if I want to look at all the FDS forms for Edison Township, I could type that LGE's name in, I hit search, and then here are all the people in Edison Township that have filed FDS forms, right? Now, I can individually go in and look at each one individually, or if I want to download all these, we give you the ability to click on the boxes or the people you want to download, right? And then we have this little captcha down here where you can type in this phrase, I think that's what it is, and hit the download button. And then what would happen is, again, it will create it as a document, as a PDF. If I open that, then we have 14 pages in here, right? So we have everybody's FDS from Edison Township downloaded into one file for me. So that brings up the next question that I get all the time from the clerks is, if somebody comes in with an OPA request, and since I'm not getting the FDS form from the LGO, how do I answer that OPA request? You point them out to this website, okay? You do not have to answer that OPA request. You could just point that person out to the website, and they can actually search and retrieve that FDS themselves. You don't need to keep a copy in your files of that FDS, okay? Because you're no longer required to get a copy of the FDS. So again, I just wanted to show you that process. This is actually the public site that will be available for the users to go out and actually search that information. So that being said, I'm kind of at the end of my demonstration here. I'm going to bring up the panel and look at the questions. While you're doing that, Mark, I'll give the, before you do the questions, I'll give the last code word in case anybody has to drop the call. The last code word, everybody, is Panama. P-A-N-A-M-A. Panama, as in Panama the country or Panama City. P-A-N-A-M-A. Very good. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so we have some questions here. Let's get to some of the questions we have. Okay, it says, do the LGOs have to enter their home address and telephone number? It is not a mandatory according to your form. No, they do not, okay? It's not a required. It actually says optional up there. It did fill in because as part of my profile, it updated, but no, they do not have to submit that information, when they go and they file. They can remove that information from the form. It's optional. Next question, when they enter the personal information, is that going to show on the form? In the past, it has been optional. Yes, if they enter it in, if they leave it there, yes, it will show on the FDS form. If they remove it, then it will not display. Okay, so it'll be up to them if they want to display it or not, or remove it. But if they do leave it there, yes, it will show up on the public site when somebody goes to search for it. What if different entities type names differently, like Michael and Mike, and can the PIN numbers be combined in the managed positions? Yes. The LGO will just have to know how that person entered them in on the roster. So if somebody put on one roster Michael Jones, but somebody else on another roster put Mike Jones, and that LGO is trying to associate his PIN number, both PIN numbers, with the first name Michael, it's not, once won't work, okay? So you'll just have to make sure you communicate with your LGOs exactly how you entered their name there. But yes, I mean, even if the names are different, Mike and Michael, as long as they know exactly how it was added on the roster, they could still associate that PIN number with their account. They don't have to create another account. They could still be associated. Okay, can you please explain dependent name and when to fill it in and when not? There has been some questions with this every year. Chris, I'll defer that question to you.
Well, I'm looking at the form now. The dependent name on the FDS only arises in the context of the specific information that's being requested. So, for example, in Section 2, financial information, it says list, hold on, let me find it. Okay, so it says provide the following information for yourself and members of your immediate family for the prior calendar year. So each of the sections that request some piece of information like source of income, if you have an immediate family member, and that would be somebody that meets the definition of immediate family member, say a child that's residing with you, you have to indicate that source of income on the form. And in that case, you're going to include the dependent's name. It's that simple. You're not listing dependents anywhere else on the form other than the spouse's name. The only time that a dependent's name is required is if it's the spouse. But for your children, for instance, there's no spot on the form to just list their names. It only comes up if it's responsive to one of the requests for information on the form.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. Okay, let's move on here. Next question. Can you please explain, oh, that was the dependent name. Sorry, let me delete that question. Okay. Property ownership. What if someone is adamant about putting in that it's both themselves and their spouse that own the real property? That's fine, and I think I demonstrated there, where if you have a piece of property and both you and the spouse own the property, then you can list that 50% each, okay? So when you list the property, when you put the block and lot in, you put 50% for yourself and 50% for your spouse. Or let's say you own that property with not your spouse, maybe somebody else, you can list the percentages, however they apply. Maybe, you inherited a beach house on Long Beach Island and it's split up between you and your siblings, right? Each own 25%. You can break that out into those percentages, on that sheet. I mean, that's not a problem. I do know last year that I believe it was a problem on the form last year. This year you should be able to do that without a problem.
Another potential scenario, just so we're all clear on this, it's very possible that the local government officer doesn't own real estate in his or her own name, but that the spouse owns real estate in his or her name. So in that case, it's mandatory that the spouse's or other dependents' property be listed, and if it's 100%, it's 100%. The local government officer does not have to have an interest in something before that becomes disclosable. As long as the spouse or dependent has that, owns that type of property, or has a source of income, or gifts, reimbursements, whatever it is, they have to list it. It's not dependent on whether the LGO is also receiving or also owns or co-owns something.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, next question. Is the address a required field under the property you own? Again, the address is not required. We're just asking for block and lot. Okay, so there is no. Again, I don't think there was a field for an address there.
There is, Mark.
There is? Oh, okay, yeah. I think I just skipped over. But no, it's not a required field because I didn't enter it in. Again, anything with the red asterisk is a required field. You'll just have to put the block and lot. That is required. Block and lot is required.
Well, let me clarify that, though.
Oh, okay.
It's required to the extent that there is an address.
Okay.
That's one of those fields where we couldn't make the field mandatory because it may not always apply. But to the extent that it's applicable and that real estate does have a street address, then it has to be disclosed.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Next question, it says, what happens if you sell by property mid-year? Please note that when you're filing your financial disclosure statement, it's actually for information in the previous year, for like 2013, not in the current year, okay? So when they're filing, even though they're filing in 2014, it happens to be information that applied up through December 31st of the previous year. So if they just bought a new house, okay, that won't be disclosed until next year on the FDS if they still have to submit. Okay, so it's like your taxes, right? You do your taxes now for last year. It's very similar. So next question we have here is, how does an LGO file an amended form? Unfortunately, like I said before, as of this time, they cannot file an amended form. The only way a new financial disclosure statement would be able to be submitted is if they got a new PIN from a new entity and they were filing a updated FDS for that new entity that hadn't been filed before. But once something is filed, there is no way at this point in time to amend, change, copy, modify that form. Okay, that's why we give them that warning at the end that whatever they submit, they cannot change it. Next question. Next year, will we be able to send emails to the LGOs listed directly from the roster to let them know that it is time to submit the FDSs again? No, we're not storing their email addresses as a data element within the system. Remember, their email address is part of their username and their login credentials. Even though we do list it as the login ID in your roster, you could utilize that obviously, through your Outlook program and send them something. But one of the questions that have come up, especially in the earlier sessions this week, was, can those email addresses fall under Oprah, right? And, our thinking is that no, because they're really credentials. It's like giving, your username for your bank account to somebody. It's a username. It's not really, even though we're using the email address as the username, it's not being put or stored in the system for communication or data element purposes. So, but you will have, it'll be listed on your roster. So if you want to, copy those email addresses and, email something out, that's fine. But we will not provide any email functionality to those email addresses within the system at this point in time. We can't say that won't change, but at this point in time, we're not doing that. So just hope that answers that question. Next question, you may want to suggest putting a link on the municipal county website to the public site. Yes, good point. Once the sites are up and running, especially the public search site, you might want to have your IT folks put a link on your municipal or county homepage to have the public be able to just quickly go out there and do searching. You can put in and say, on our homepage or on our part of our, site, you can just click on that link and see anybody's FDS for our entity. So, yeah, good point.
And something else I want to add to that is that at some point in the process, the rosters are also going to be available online. That's really the only way somebody in the public will be able to know who was required to file, is if they have access to the roster. We're still trying to figure out how to make that happen from a practical perspective, and I tend to think that we're not going to make the rosters available until after the filing deadline passes. But so that's still in development on some level, but it's something that we're going to be moving towards for this year.
Okay, good, thanks. Is the zip code needed in the address field? You didn't enter it, but the field notes street, city, state, and zip. Again, I forget what screen that I was on when I was doing it. If it allowed me to go on beyond that screen, it's probably not a required field, even though it's listed there. I probably just forgot to enter it in. Remember, anything with the red asterisk is a required field. And if you try to move to another screen where a required field is required, it won't allow you to do that. So it must have not have been a required field, even though it was on the screen there. Next question, will there be a test system available for the clerks to practice data entry and also to discover the nuances of the FDSs for the LGOs? At this point in time, I don't think we've talked about giving a test system out there. I don't know. That would have to be something we would have to discuss further if that's going to be made available or not. So we would have to get back to you on that one. I don't think there's any definite answer for that right at this point.
No, but remember too that you can delete. You can practice working on your rosters and delete people as you're going along, until such time as you give those people the PIN number and they log on and then they file their FDS. So you can, in a sense, you can practice without even really calling it a test site, and then just delete everybody and start over if you want to do that, as well. I think based on, some of us internally testing this, our belief is that creating the roster, although it might be a little bit of work if you have like 400 of these people to add, it's not very complicated or difficult to do, especially once you do it once or twice. You'll see how easy it really is. And I've been practicing on it, and you can, like I said, you can delete things until you start pumping those PIN numbers out to people and they start submitting their forms. So, that's why we're going to give you guys time once we go live with this. We're going to give the local government entity reps plenty of time to, pull their rosters together, and that should give you enough time to practice it out on your side. And you'll also be able to create your FDS first before anybody else if you want to do that as well. Because you'll create a PIN number for yourself, and then you'll be able to log in as an LGO and create your FDS.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chris. Next question. It says, I'm confused about the requirements for disclosing address. Could you clarify? I believe the address, if you're talking about the person who's filing the FDS, if their address, it's an optional field. They do not have to submit their personal address along with the FDS form. So, I think that's the address you're talking about. So if it's something different, please just type another question. But it's optional, when on that first screen of the FDS form, they can actually remove their address information and do not have to submit their address information when they file. Next question. What happens if someone was not on the Board of Commission in 2013? Do they file for 2014? No. If they weren't part of, oh wait.
No, that's not right. If they're part of the board now, or if they're a local government now in 2014, they file this year. It's last year's information that they're supporting the questions with.
Okay. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. I was thinking the other way around. Yeah. Yeah. So if they're part of your organization today, they need to file, with information from 2013. Correct. Okay. It says, my concern is that my LGOs will be totally confused and file incorrectly. Since the form can't be amended, it will be a problem. Yeah, it's, again, again, personally, I've been doing this now for a while here, doing all these training sessions. You might have some people who are confused. We will have the training video, and hopefully, when I do this training video, it's very clear. Obviously they can watch the training video multiple times to make sure that they get it, correct and, right when they go to file. But again, it's, as an LGE, it's really the LGO's responsibility to make sure that they're filing the form correctly. And again, I would say, have them seek help from a family member or a friend if possible, and have them help them if possible. So again, it's what they have to do. Unfortunately, it's one of those things about, being on as a local government official. So, okay, I think we're at the end of our questions. So, me and Chris will stay on a couple more minutes, but I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know we, run over the normal hour that we had. We had a lot to go into, and we wanted to make sure that we answer everybody's questions so everybody has a good, thorough understanding of the system. We're excited. We think that the system is going to definitely make things more uniform for the 40,000 plus LGOs that have to submit these FDSs. Hopefully for the LGEs, it makes your life a little bit easier. Just like I said, creating that roster is probably going to be the hardest part of this process initially. But again, you'll have the ability to go in. You'll be able to know who has filed, who hasn't filed. If people need to or want to look for somebody's FDS form, you'll be able to direct them right out to the FDS. Out to the public site. They could search themselves. Less paper for you. You don't have to get a copy of that receipt or that form. So we've taken that burden away from you. So again, there will be information out on the live site, based on contact information if you run into any problems. We enjoy feedback, so as you get into the system, any feedback is welcome. We'll take that into account, as we continue to develop the system and just, make it, more user-friendly. So again, I want to thank you. If there's anything else anybody needs, feel free to, I know you'll probably get a follow-up email for this session with my email. You can, a bunch of people drop me emails already. That's fine. I'll respond as I can. If not, I'll direct them over to Chris. But, again, thank you, and everybody have a good day. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes in case there's any other questions that come in. Let's see here. Okay, question that just came in. Will we be provided with the names of the individuals who must file? No. That'll be up to you to determine who has to file within your entity or organization. Again, as we mentioned earlier, you might want to talk to your labor council and determine who within your organization needs to file. There are documents or information out both on the municipal clerk's website and also at the DTA website that lists who has to file. But the system will not provide any names for individuals who have to file. You'll have to determine within your organization who has to file.
That question sounds to me like it came from a person who's doing this for the first time, maybe even from a college environment. There's almost a near certainty that your organization has already filed rosters with us. What I would do if I were you is find your roster from prior years. Try to find last year's roster in particular, and that should be your starting point to clean up your roster and make sure that you only have true local government officers on there. That way, you're not trying to do this from scratch. If you've just been appointed to do this, and I know a lot of the colleges have started to assign people internally to do this. You don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Try to find last year's roster and work from that.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Oh, okay. Question came up. Where do we use the 3 code words? You'll use those 3 code words on the form that you submit for your CEU credits. So you'll have to list those 3 code words on that form. Chris, was there a specific field or somewhere on that form they had to list them?
I think it's section 2. They could put it anywhere as long as it's noticeable.
Okay. Okay, so I think we're at around 3:30 right now. I think we'll wrap up this session. Again, we will be, at some point, we'll be posting these recordings on a website. We'll communicate that information to you, so if you want to go back and review the recordings, not just today's recording, but some of the previous ones, if you want to listen to some of the questions that came up and were answered, you're more than welcome to do that. Again, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Chris for joining us today. And hope everybody has a great day. So I'll talk to you later. Take care.